Okay, here we are, another live and another Good Gut live, and we're excited. It's crazy. I was thinking like how long we've been doing these Good Gut lives, and it's really exciting and it's fun for us, and our patients get a kick out of it. I know we're not the number one podcast in the world, or even in our city, maybe, but it's nice to be here. We like to be a resource. We are very excited about today's topic. Today's topic are plant compounds that can hurt your stomach.
Hmm.
And so we want to clarify that. Spoiler alert, plants can hurt your stomach, but there's a big but. And we're going to get into that. We're going to get into, there's a big but. We're going to get into all of that, all the details and the context, because we continue to see, if you're on TikTok, which congratulations, TikTok, you're back. If you're on Instagram, or wherever you are, YouTube, I'm sure if you search plant compounds or plants hurt my stomach on YouTube, this video might pop up. Or, there's so many things that can pop up, but you're going to see things like oxalates are bad for you. Recently, on a very big podcast, there was this woman who's an oxalate educator
I saw
that's
that.
been going around,
Ooh,
very
she's
viral,
promoting her book. So you're going to see her a lot on a lot of
which
podcasts because that's how these podcasts work. When somebody has a new book or program or something they're promoting, they reach out to all these different podcasts and they
she has a
say,
great PR
"Hey,
team.
I want to be on your podcast and talk about my thing." And it's definitely sensational what she's talking about. So it
Yes.
gets people's attention.
And especially when it's sensational, we're talking about it, everyone's commenting about it. We're seeing other doctors and plant-based doctors and people in the plant-based community talking about it. So that's exactly what they want, which it's hard. It's like, yeah, we got to talk about it because so many people just get confused. So many people are just like, oh my gosh, is this true? I definitely want to look into this more, in this woman and how she's like an oxalate educator or an oxalate something. It's a very unique name, even she calls herself. Like, she's this oxalate expert, and basically is saying all plants are bad for you, which is wild that we're still having this discussion. But that is why we're picking this topic. Actually, we picked this
She's like
topic.
Dr. Gundry
That's what I was gonna say.
reincarnated.
Dr. Gundry 2.0, which happens, and that we actually had this topic like geared up with our
Oh,
team before this even happened. So this is perfect.
interesting.
And if you're listening to this later on the Good Gut Live podcast, again, our lives are a little bit, or the podcast I would say is a couple weeks delayed, but this is still very, very relevant. So we're gonna get into plant compounds, oxalates, phytates, sulfur, histamine. We can get into all that like we normally do. So if you've been following us, thank you. Make sure you follow, subscribe wherever you're listening to this. We'd really appreciate that, so that we're not sensational though. What a bummer. We're not sensational. We got to do something like plants are, you know what I mean? It's like this sensational. We're not. We
Surprising.
actually,
We're ethical.
well, not just ethical. I mean, you can, I guess, be sensational and ethical, maybe, but we like to just be that nice calm. If you want to come here and let your nervous system rest a little bit, that's what we like to be. We like to be like this healthy middle ground that goes, yeah, that's a little bit true, but here's some other truth, and here's where it's grounded. We like to be the level-headed friend that you can turn to and go, hey, is this true? Is this okay? And we go, yeah, here, let me explain it to you. Take a deep breath. That's what Good Gut Live likes to be, you know? And
Mhm.
if you care about that, if you appreciate that, share this, make this be sensational, and share that, right? If you're like, hey, we should have this level-headed, common sense mindset, hopefully that gets shared more eventually. That's what we're going to be. That's what we're going to continue to be, and curate this really just healthy ecosystem where you can thrive and truly be healthy. And sure, you can do supplements, and sure, you can do some medications, and sure, there's so many things that are good, and we try to just take the good from it all and piece it together for you in a way you can understand. So yes, unfortunately, that doesn't really get us viral, and that's okay. But we're gonna be that level-headed friend you can always turn to. Okay, so let's get in this topic a little bit. I mean, it started with oxalates, but there's so many things. And really, again, what I'll say is that context matters. This is our big mantra here. When you're hearing plants are bad for you, what does that mean, right? When you're hearing all plants, I mean, there's some extremists. I mean, the clip I saw was like very extreme. All plants are bad for you, and it was very much focusing on oxalates. Then you have the some of the people that are like, no, eat some plants. and then they demonize like specific nightshades and specific type of plants. Then you have the people that are more plant-based. They're like, eat more plants, right? We need to eat more plants. And then you have even extremists on the plant-based side where it's like, eat all raw plants, 100% plants, only raw plant. So you have this wide spectrum, okay? And you're then left to be like, what the heck is true? What do I do? And so what we say is it all can be true in a sense to some degree, where yes, some may thrive. I find myself thriving on a lot of plants. I can eat a lot of plants. Maybe I toot a little bit more some days when I have a little more plants. My, my gut buggies, my microbiome is processing that, fermenting that, and I'm a little bit more tooty. And Dahlia's like, "Hey, cool it." And I'm like, my microbes are doing their thing,
Yes.
right?
Going for it.
Wonderful. And I can handle that. For some, if they ate maybe the amount of fiber I ate, especially if they've had GI issues or if they've been on the standard American diet for a while, they would be hunched over in pain, right? Dahlia shared, I think you shared this on the last Good Gut Live. I made this garlic aioli, and she ate too much of it. And her history of IBS and SIBO, which I don't have, made her go, "Oh, I do not feel that great today," because
That was
you ate more than
excessive.
I did even. And it
Yeah.
even made me, I was like, man, my breath tasted garlicky. And I even felt a little like, woo, yeah, that was massive amounts of garlic. Um, which, so again, that context matters. Like, how much of these sulfur rich, or FODMAP rich foods are you eating at one time? That will factor into it. So all this to say, all this matters and all this context matters. And you are not the same as your spouse or your friend or that person on the internet. So overall, I think if you've been following us and listening to us, our stance is eat more plants. We're really in a plant deficit, especially if we're talking about the US. But there's important context and nuance where if you've been struggling with IBS and SIBO, if you have these gut issues, if you're like, I poop once a week, the list can go on and on, diarrhea, bloating, then you need some guidance a bit on how you do this.
And we're going to be realists, right? Because I used to feel like something was wrong with me because it's like, okay, all these health professionals are just telling me to eat plants, but I don't feel amazing every time I do. So you have to be real. You need to be able to eat, digest, and absorb the plants. It's not
Right.
just about you trying to eat them. If they cause extreme digestive discomfort, if you find that they give you malabsorption and you're like, there's that salad that I ate the next day, then you're not digesting and absorbing the plants well. So we need to figure out why. We don't need to just avoid the plants and then write a book and tell everyone plants are killing you and plants are bad for you. We need to figure out what's going on with your gut that's preventing you from digesting, absorbing, and tolerating the plants. So that's where it comes down to, again, having somebody who is more balanced and understands that it's not just our physiology. We also have microbes and bacteria and fungi and bugs in our gut who are really
Mhm.
responsible for helping out with that process. And when it comes to oxalates, since it's the one that you mentioned first
Yeah,
and
let's start with
foremost,
that.
there is so much context to be given
Totally.
here. So we know a couple things because you actually made a video on this a few years back because there was another, I
It
think she
actually
was in,
did go viral.
it did go viral. And then the creator of that original video, she was this like Ayurvedic woman, I think.
Oh,
She
I'm gonna pull it up.
she flagged it.
She got really upset.
She got really upset. She was messaging us threatening things. She was like, "You're calling me out and I don't appreciate it." And so she actually made it so that you couldn't duet her video, and it deleted James's video. That was getting really great feedback of people saying, "Oh, that makes a ton of sense." So,
Mhm.
this recent author, this person a few years ago, you've heard of these carnivore MDs. They're all saying the same thing, right? Oxalates, lectins, salicylates, phytates, what have you, they can cause discomfort. So just never feel uncomfortable and never eat them. Even though there's so much benefit with them, don't eat them. So they're telling you avoid foods that are high in oxalates. And that's a really wide variety of food. Tons of whole grains, tons of nuts, seeds, different vegetables, different fruits. There's so much out there that is high in oxalate. And one, that's already going to stress you out because you're like, well, what the heck do I eat? And two, it's going to confuse a person to not understand if they actually could very well digest and absorb and break down the oxalates, or they are not somebody who could. So when it comes to oxalates, it's important to understand foods like some of the ones I just mentioned contain a compound called oxalic acid. This is usually a compound that, one, has antioxidant properties if it's properly digested and absorbed. You have specific bacteria, or you're supposed to have specific bacteria called oxalobacter. So, oxalobacter, just like it sounds, is very specialized and really there to break down oxalic acid.
Mhm.
And also, this oxalobacter is responsible for binding the oxalic acid to calcium. Usually, then the calcium grabs the oxalic acid, the oxalates, and escorts it out through the colon, through the intestines, and nothing happens. Well, what happens in certain instances is, say somebody is lacking oxalobacter. We have
Mhm.
seen in studies that if they have a yeast or fungal overgrowth, it disrupts certain bacterial colonies, oxalobacter being one of them. So, say somebody has a fungal overgrowth, they have a deficit of oxalobacter. Maybe they have a very low calcium diet where they're not intaking sufficient amount of calcium. Maybe they have their colon resected, or they have something like short bowel syndrome. These are going to pose problems
Mhm.
because the colon is where the calcium binds to the oxalate. So if you're missing the bacteria, you're missing the colon, you're missing the calcium, what's going to happen is instead calcium is going to bind fatty acids, and then it leaves the oxalic acid, the oxalates, freely floating. So then the body has to try to get rid of it somehow, and it pushes it through the kidneys. And that's where they'll build up in the kidneys into these oxalate stones. And so people get kidney stones that are made of oxalates. Sometimes there's a little bit of calcium in the stones, but usually it's a calcium oxalate stone or just an oxalate stone. So then, of course, if you're somebody who's gone through that, you're going to be like, tell the world oxalate's bad for you.
Right.
And I would bet you that 9 out of 10 of these people who are telling you these things don't eat oxalates, don't eat phytates, don't eat salicylates. They went through something bad, and I want to give them
Totally.
the benefit of the doubt that they're trying to help people, but you need to give that context behind it that, oh, wait, okay, it is actually beneficial for me. Oxalic acid
Mhm.
is an antioxidant and beneficial for my gut. I need to make sure I don't have fungal overgrowth. I need to make sure that I'm fostering my bacterial community. So I have oxalobacter. I need to make sure I'm eating enough calcium. Then great. The
Right.
oxalate rich foods benefit me.
You just gave, and guys, make sure you, if you're not already following us, subscribe, click down below. You just gave such a great overview of that, of oxalates and that context. And really, what you're saying at the end of the day is many are lacking in foundational nutrition. So then we're getting all these issues and we're
Mhm.
blaming the oxalate, right? It's like if you're lacking, which many are in the bacteria, because we're not eating fermented foods. I'm drinking my kombucha here for those just listening. I have my beverage I'm drinking. Dahlia is
My
actually drinking
probiotic
a
is in here.
probiotic almond milk, which is almost like a kefir, you can almost call it. She's
Mhm.
drinking her kefir. And so it's
Shout
like,
out to
are
BSC.
you doing that, right? Are you doing that? A majority no, just based on the data, right? Majority are on. I mean, growing up, we had dose after dose of antibiotics. We've been decimated and obliterated by antibiotics, which help us to not maintain species in our gut, like oxalobacter, that can help us do this really important process. How many of you out there are constipated? Imagine this constipation.
Mm.
Is that going to help facilitate or be a detriment to removing this calcium oxalate compound out of your colon? The answer is
Mhm.
it's going to be a detriment, right? If you're only pooping once a week, that oxalate calcium compound
Gets reabsorbed.
is going to get reabsorbed
Yep.
just with all the other gases, the inflammatory gases and the other inflammatory compounds. And then you start to get irritation, and they call it IBS. Then, the list goes on and on from there, which we've talked about in other episodes.
But then you need to ask that question.
Right.
Is it the oxalate, or is it the fact that you're so constipated
Right.
that anything really is going to cause digestive discomfort because you're not detoxing. You need to be
Right.
pooping several times a day. So it's so important to give that context. But again, this isn't sexy to give context. It isn't exciting. It's more exciting for us to come on here and scare people and say really frightening
Unfortunately.
things. And that's what social media is, right? People
Yeah.
want this infotainment where they're like, oh, whether it's true or not, I'm going to just eat it all up. I'm going to share it.
Mhm.
I'm going to tell my whole family plants are bad for you. But you need to really understand who you're getting information from. What is their
Yeah.
background? Do they have a true understanding of the microbiome and what some of these compounds, what the benefits of them are, what the detriment could be?
It's
Because don't
wild.
get me wrong, I'm not sitting here telling all my patients, yeah, just eat oxalate and just, make sure you're having calcium with it. Certain instances, I've had patients who come to me and they're like, I was just hospitalized and I had to have a surgery to remove an oxalate stone. Okay, let's temporarily go on a low oxalate diet because you clearly cannot digest them right now.
Right.
So then let's work on your gut, give it some time, allow things to balance out. Then we will reintroduce oxalates along with calcium once your gut is ready for it, once your fungal overgrowth is taken care of, once you have fortified your oxalobacter
Yeah.
and some of your other species.
And it is really shady. I mean, for all we know, this woman could maybe that is in her book, but she's using these scare tactics to then sell her book, which doesn't really make sense. I don't know. I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt, but
I haven't read the book.
we haven't read the book. And in the clip, though, it doesn't sound, I mean, saying all plants are bad and never eat oxalates is very different from what Dahlia is saying, which is, hey, oxalates can do this, but this is what you need to do to properly process oxalates and really then educating, hey, oxalates are actually really good for you when your microbiome are properly processing them. Oxalates can be very beneficial to your gut when your microbiome is properly processing them, right? So that's not what we're hearing from a lot of these people, this Gundry 2.0 or, other people kind of saying this. So it's really unfortunate. It's perpetuating this movement of like plants are bad and don't eat plants when really, I mean, a majority of Americans need to eat plants. And yeah, I did find sorry if you're hearing that noise I was looking for. I don't know why my phone was making noise. But yeah, one got removed. So an Ayurvedic doctor got really mad at us for just kind of commenting and that got removed. But another one, this guy, I forgot this guy's
Dave
name.
Asprey.
Dave Asprey, he was doing a thing on oatmeal and phytates, which is kind of oxalates, phytates. They're in that category of anti-nutrients. For those that can't see the screen, I'm showing a video on our Instagram at Married to Health. This one went pretty viral. It got like over 200,000 views, which is great. But it's unfortunate. Like you have to use these very inflammatory people, and it's like, hey, I'm just gonna comment to kind of set the record straight, and that kind of gets attention, which is wonderful. We're trying to give that context, but it's like you need this spark of fire to then create all this frenzy. And I get it. It's exciting. It is sexy to be up on a stage and go, oxalates are bad. This is what you're going to do. Just do my program, take my powder, and you're going to be amazing. It's like, well, no, there's so much more to understand. And it's not sexy to hunker down and work with the dietitian and put in the time and resources and feel good. And it may take 6 months or 6 years. That's not sexy to say, right? It's way more sexy to go, come to my conference and you're going to be healed and you're going to and make all these amazing promises. But that's kind of not the reality for some. And unfortunately, we're seeing some who understand this. We're also seeing a new generation going like, yeah, I'm going to eat 20 pounds of beef a day and I'm going to eat 60 eggs with the whole shell. And you have these people following these I don't want to, I mean, Liver King or putting people in these categories that just really aren't real. They're like characters selling you something, right? It's like the character on the cereal box when you're 3 years old and you're like, wow, it looks shiny, it looks cool, I want that. And that's kind of what we're seeing, reiterations of that in social media. So oxalates oxalates can they are the is it a compound that can hurt your stomach? Yes, but there's so many, but it's also a compound that's beneficial for your gut microbiome. It's also a compound that is very useful in the totality of your health. And your goal should be to figure out why, if you're having trouble with oxalates, and you can heal that. You can heal with each meal that, right? Oh, that's our tagline, heal with each meal. Go figure. And you can help a lot with that. And so and we see that with our patients across the spectrum, like Dahlia said, some who are really severe and others who are like, oh, if I made these tweaks and be a little patient, and then, oh, I'm eating oxalates again. I ate that whole bowl of spinach in my burrito bowl, and wow, I feel great. So you
Mhm.
can totally do that because your gut microbiome is always changing based on your inputs, based on what you're doing for it. It can always change, enhance,
In
grow,
one day, your microbiome
even
can
in one
begin
day.
to show changes. So
Totally.
you really want to give that context and really be real with yourself. Okay, how did I get here? Was I eating in a balanced way? Was I maybe eating in a
Right.
little bit of a disordered way? Did I
Hmm.
have something that maybe triggered dysbiosis or SIBO? Or
Hmm.
do I have inflammatory bowel disease? Because
Hmm.
it is important to ask those questions before just kind of throwing things in. And you hear it with a lot of these sensationalists like, yeah, I was eating pounds of spinach. Is that even healthy for you to be doing? Why are you eating pounds of spinach? Um, so you really want to ask yourself, like, does this person sound like they're providing sound advice? Because
Hmm.
from what I've observed, right, I've been a dietitian now for almost 14 years. From what I hear in a lot of these messages from these physicians or non people who are not trained in eating disorder, disordered eating,
Mm.
psychology of eating, you can tell so many of them have eating disorders
Mm.
or a very disordered relationship with food. And that's
Interesting.
where you're looking for this villain. That was what hurt me. It was the oxalates. And then again, you then want to tell everyone like beware of the oxalates. They're going to hurt you too. But were you eating in a balanced way before? Was your gut fractured before?
Mhm.
And that's why you couldn't break down fill in the blank oxalates, lectins, phytates, what have you, histamines,
Mhm.
because it's easy to blame the compound, or it's nice maybe to have something to go off of.
Mhm.
I can work with that, right? If I know it could be oxalates or it could be histamines, I can work with that. But something got you there. It
Mhm.
wasn't just the histamine itself, because why then are so many other people eating and digesting and tolerating histamines and oxalates and lectins and not only not being hurt by them, but finding benefit in eating them? Because
Mhm.
we can let's take lectins. I think this conversation has kind of died down, which I think that was Gundry's shtick, right? It was lectins. It wasn't
Mhm.
necessarily oxalates. So this lady's new. She picked up on another compound, another chemical compound in food.
2.0.
So we've heard years ago lectins were the bad thing that people were fearing, and lectins are they are proteins that are known to bind
Mhm.
carbohydrates. So they're a carbohydrate binding protein, and they're in foods like nightshades. So nightshade vegetables are things that have small seeds in them. Think tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, different foods that contain nightshades. So for years, we were hearing don't eat lectins. It's the lectins that are bad for you. There's no data to show that lectins themselves are bad for you. And
Mhm.
there are over 85 plant foods that contain lectins. Usually they are detrimental if you're eating them in a form that you're not supposed to be eating them in, like raw kidney beans. You're
Mhm.
not supposed to eat beans raw like that. So if you're eating raw kidney beans, yeah, sure, you can certainly have
Mhm.
issues and actually really harm yourself if you're eating that content of lectins. But again, it's not sexy to give that context and that background to say if you just soak them and cook them, most of the lectins are
Sorry,
reduced.
I wanna back up. We're gonna continue with lectins, but I wanna do so we did oxalates, gave that context, and then I wanna just leave where how can people break down oxalates just really quickly. So it's actually the
Mm,
foods that contain oxalates will help you kind of grow, so to say, the oxalobacter bacteria that can help them break it down. And then we can do that for lectins as well as you
mhm.
continue the conversation with lectins. But yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's super important to have that context and really understand with that, like, is it the lectins? Is
Mhm.
it the oxalates? Because they've actually done studies. They put groups of people on a no lectin diet
Mhm.
and a high lectin diet and measured specific inflammatory markers like sedimentation rate, C reactive protein, and they actually found inflammatory markers decreased when people were eating high amounts of lectins. We do know those who are in the blue zones, which controversial in itself. But we can say, for the most part, those who are in the blue zones are consuming a lot of these lectins, have lower inflammatory markers. So
Yeah.
there's no marked data to say these increase autoimmune disease, but we do know autoimmune disease is associated with fractured guts.
Hmm.
So it's going back to the source and just asking more productive questions and saying, how can we work on our guts, like James was mentioning, so that way we can digest lectins and we can digest oxalates as well. So with lectins, like I was mentioning, soak foods that are high in lectins because that actually pulls a lot of them out into the water. So whether that's nuts or seeds or whole grains or beans, do that.
Okay.
You can freeze certain fruits and vegetables, and that will break down the compound. You can cook them, and that denatures that lectin protein as well. So if you're worried about how you'll digest them, you can do some of these different things. So there's so much that can be done to work on your bugs that will help with digestion, working on the lining of your intestines because we make so many of our enzymes that help break down various proteins
Hmm.
and carbohydrates and fats and compounds that are found in these different foods. So that way we're not sitting there saying it's the lectins, it's the phytates, it's the salicylates, whatever it is.
Right. And then when it comes to lectins, so lactobacillus and bifidobacteria are great to help break down the lectins. And really, it's not breaking down, they're actually eating and digesting and creating postbiotics from the lectins. And we do find that a lot of, first world populations are deficient in lactobacillus bifidobacteria. That is why we've seen this big push of probiotics. It's been, probiotic supplementation, which can be good in the correct context, but it's very important to understand that you can get a lot of these probiotics from a healthy gut, from the foods you're eating, from fermented foods, from your environment, as long as you have a healthy ecosystem for them to thrive.
Mm,
We're seeing a deficiency in these probiotic species in our own guts, which are then they're not there to help you break down the lectins you're eating. And again, we are villainizing the food. We're going, oh, it's the lectins, without taking responsibility of going, oh my gosh, I have very low lactobacillus. I have very low bifidobacteria, and that's an issue. And we've seen this in studies of gastroenterologists testing populations, testing their stool samples and seeing low to none to no, which isn't
bifido.
perfect, bifidobacteria and lactobacillus, which is very scary. Again, this is stool samples. We take it with a grain of salt, but it's very scary to see that. We should have an abundance of these species of these microbes, and because they do a lot of great things for us. So that's a big red flag that we're
Mhm.
seeing. So yeah.
So without getting into hundreds of dollars of testing, right? How can one know whether they're okay with these things or not? Um, I think in the next coming years, some of these tests, one will become validated because stool tests are not validated, but I think they can
Mhm.
be very informative. We just need to have more uniformity and more of a baseline with it. So stool testing, I think, is a viable option in the future once we have a little bit more data. And again, I'm not hating on stool testing. I sometimes order stool tests for my patients, these functional stool tests, but we do need to have a little bit more information. So if you're recognizing a pattern with certain foods, first place to start, keep a food journal. Second place to start, see a food specialist, right? Go visit a dietitian. Your doctor is not always a food
The
specialist.
guy at the deli, the food specialist guy
No.
at the supermarket.
Save your dad jokes for later. But see an
Couldn't resist.
actual food and nutrition specialist because we will keenly pick out certain compounds of things. I can't even tell you how many times my patients have self prescribed a low FODMAP diet, a low lectin diet, a nightshade
Mm,
free diet. And I'll recognize,
mm,
like, actually, I think you have a histamine intolerance. And
mm.
yes, those foods happen to also have lectins or FODMAPs in them, but I don't think that's actually your problem. And then we'll work on identifying why they have a histamine intolerance. Why are you reacting to this compound that your own body can make without you even eating more of it? Why are you not breaking it down and then it's causing symptoms for you? So bring that to somebody who can help, one, really give you guided and tailored advice, and two, preserve your relationship with food. Because I know it feels like food is the one thing you can control, and it's super
Mhm.
easy to just keep cutting foods. So oftentimes I will have people come to me and they're like, I eat four things. Those are my safe foods. I'm working with a patient right now. She has like two safe foods, and they're highly processed foods, but she's gotten to the point where her gut is so fractured, it's hard for her to digest other things. And this person has worked with a gastroenterologist, a primary doctor, a functional medicine doctor, a naturopath, and no one was able to help her fix her gut or introduce more foods without just wanting to run $5 million of testing.
Mhm.
So get with someone who can give you targeted advice and at least have you say, hey, I don't really think that those are the issue, or maybe they are. Good job, you were very intuitive with what you selected.
Mhm.
Here's how we reintroduce them, because unless you have celiac disease or an allergy to a food, a long-term elimination diet of whatever it is not ever going to heal your gut. It's not
Mhm.
ever going to grow more lactobacillus bifidobacteria or any of your commensal anti-inflammatory species. Those long-term, very restrictive elimination diets are never going to heal your gut lining. They're never going to promote greater motility. So it's really understanding what types of compounds in foods am I not able to break down and digest? Why is that? What can I do about it? How can I eventually introduce the foods again?
Yes. And I see, hey Manju, what's up? I see you guys, I see questions coming in. So if you guys have
Mhm.
questions, if you've been listening, put them down below. What's up, Manju? I see Kat Girl, I think that is Kat or Kathy Ree. Anyway, Sibo and some questions. So we see your questions coming in on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. Zena, I see your questions. We're going to answer some questions. So put them down below if you're listening live, and we're going to get to those. But yes, and to Dahlia's point, this analogy, it's like someone who's very weak in their legs and they're working out and they want to gain muscle. And it's like, every time I do squats or every time I'm in yoga doing lunges or squatting or trying to hold a pose, it just hurts. It hurts so bad. And okay, and then you have the trainer going, yeah, just don't do it if it hurts, right? Well, it's like that makes
Are
no
you going to
sense.
grow?
Right? Are you going to grow? So it is, again, we don't want it to hurt where like you're going to injure your knee or your hip
Mhm.
or you're pulling a ligament, right? That's not what we're saying. The same is true for your gut, where yeah, you don't want to just go from I can only eat two safe foods to no, make it hurt, eat a bunch of spinach and broccoli and cauliflower. It's like, no, that's not what we're saying. But you work in a way, you go kind of low and slow, you understand what's actually going on, and you slowly start to challenge your gut microbiome, reintroduce in a proper healthy way. Supplements can help, some medications can help, depending. We'll get into SIBO. Obviously, I see a question about SIBO, which when you have an overgrowth, that's something entirely different than when you don't have an overgrowth. So that's important context as well.
So you can have
And
undergrowth, overgrowth.
you can have undergrowth, overgrowth, right? You can have structural issues, you can have thyroid issues, and so a lot there. So it's important to understand that, and then you have a game plan, because very different of a trainer saying squat more and they don't know this person has dystrophy in their muscles or a knee surgery recently than someone who doesn't, right? You're going to have a completely different plan of growing those leg muscles. So quick analogy, and muscles are an easy analogy. We have a debt analogy too that we use, but that's more for SIBO.
And that would be, when these sensationalists pop up, it's almost like someone who just worked out for the first time, injured themselves, and then went online and was like, exercise is going to kill
Yeah,
you.
it's kind of crazy,
And
huh?
it's like, who are you? And I'm
Yeah.
sorry that you got hurt. What happened? How did that end up happening? Did you need some help along the way and kind of pushed it on your own, and now you're telling everyone exercise is bad for you? It's the same thing with vegetables. Like, I cannot show you enough data to say vegetables are good for you. So when you have this random person, it's like, what
Yeah.
is your background?
Yeah.
You're trying to tell people that vegetables are not good for them. Like, where are you getting this from?
Yeah.
So before you take this advice from someone, ask those questions, like, who is this lady? Who is this oxalate lady? And what
She's
is her
definitely got me
qualification?
curious. I'm like, who
Yeah.
are you? Where'd you come
Or even
from?
like Dr.
Wow.
Gundry. Again, people are like, he's a medical doctor, right? They're not so quick to say pseudoscience on somebody who's an MD. He's a cardiothoracic
Cardiologist.
surgeon? Like, do you know about nutrition and the gut microbiome? Like,
He
just
learned.
because you are a physician, it doesn't mean you know about nutrition. We have all very well heard by this point. Physicians can receive 0 hours of nutrition in school. So for them to be giving nutrition advice and
Mm,
become a #1 New York Times bestseller when they haven't proven why they should be giving you nutrition advice, you need to
mhm.
be really mindful in who you're taking that advice from and really ask, like, why aren't dietitians out there saying vegetables are bad for you? Right? Like, because we read the data on it and we're not going to lose our own credibility by saying something that's not necessarily true.
And it's important to point out we don't defend all dietitians, right? It's like
Yeah.
saying all mechanics are great. No, some mechanics are shady and horrible, and other mechanics are amazing and are going to do great work on your car. Same with dietitians, same with doctors, same with all health professionals. Find the right one. But yeah, I'm seeing some really great
Really good
questions come
questions.
in.
And a couple of them are similar. Somebody saying,
Go ahead.
this is a very timely message because we're in California. We have fires, unfortunately, in
Mm,
LA. So somebody's saying, I got a severe sinus and bronchial infection since the fires. I'm taking antibiotics. How can I protect my gut?
yeah.
And someone else is asking, I've been taking too many antibiotics. What can I do to fix my gut?
Yep.
So we know antibiotics can be life saving. Take them when you absolutely need them.
Mhm.
um, if you are being recommended antibiotics, ask your care team, do I absolutely need these?
Yeah. It's just life or death.
Is this life or death? Are there alternatives or things that can target that area only? Because when you're taking an oral antibiotic, it is going to affect you tip to toe. And I am not a medical doctor. I cannot prescribe antibiotics.
Disclaimer.
So, yeah, disclaimer, I'm not a medication specialist. I have to say that. But I am a microbiome specialist. And I do see a lot of people asking me this question. When it comes to your sinuses in particular, if it was just the sinus infection without the bronchial infection, the lung infection, you can ask, can you give me some type of nasal rinse antibiotic that's just going to target my sinuses? When it's in your lungs, you can ask, can I use like a nebulizer or something that's just getting into my lungs versus taking something by mouth that tip to toe usually is broad spectrum. So that's always my first question. If I'm ever prescribed antibiotics, my family members, I always encourage them to ask those questions. Is there some
Mhm.
type of localized antibiotic? If you have a skin infection, can I take something topical and use something topical versus oral? Oral antibiotics are a lot less expensive, easier to acquire. So they're just more easily prescribed. And they might very well be the best thing for you, but ask those questions before you take them. And if you did need to take them, sometimes you do, then you just want to work on repleting who you had before if you had a good gut environment before.
Mhm.
So, what we do know is start eating fiber. That prebiotic fiber is food for your natural probiotic bacteria and other microbes that were already
Mhm.
living there before the antibiotic. Because you can very well rebuild those bugs within just a few weeks.
Mhm.
So start eating the food, start feeding them their food that they're going to thrive with. Eat things like resistant starches that are called that because they resist digestion and absorption in your small intestine. They go into your colon where over 38 trillion of your bacteria are living and they feed them.
It's like
So
a big buffet.
like a big buffet. So eat things like potatoes that have been cooked and cooled. You can eat plantains. You can use plantain flour, greener bananas, green banana flour,
Mhm.
rice that has been cooked and cooled. So these very starchy foods are favorite foods for your gut bugs. So start eating those again.
Mhm.
Eat fermented foods because those fermented foods contain live bacteria. So there is a chance that they will make it through your stomach acid, small intestine, and reinoculate your colon. So start doing that. And also
Yeah.
just eat antioxidants, eat anti inflammatory colors. Because a lot of the times, chances are these opportunists can very much withstand this sterile environment if you have been given antibiotics. So sometimes they're the last man standing, these inflammatory, opportunistic bugs. So then they're like, haha, I'm here by myself. I'm going to wreak havoc. So really try to get your good guys, your defenders back in as soon as possible. Eat those fermented foods if you can tolerate them. And if you're finding you can't, then reach out to a food specialist who can
Mhm.
really help you understand what we can slowly but surely start introducing for you.
And those colors are polyphenols that we don't break down and digest. Our
Hmm.
microbes do. They break them down and create these healthy postbiotics from the color. We are not technically using the color, our microbes are. I know we said that before, but I always like to say that because it's really cool. It's just to understand you are, again, supporting and helping your microbes. And again, I know
Well,
Manju's a gardener, or what were you gonna say?
I was going to say one way
Yeah.
to know, just before moving on from that, one
Hmm.
way to know if your microbes are using the colors well is
Mm,
to not see them in your stool. So if you're somebody who says, I eat a lot of greens, my poop is green. I eat sweet potatoes,
right.
my poop is orange. I'm eating any amount of red and my poop is red. Then your microbes are not digesting those polyphenols well. You might have a lack of those bacteria and other gut bugs to
Mhm.
break down and absorb and digest those polyphenols. You really should not be seeing everything you put in on the other side. If you're seeing undigested fiber, undigested colors, undigested food for them, everything you're eating, something's off. Certain things we're not going to digest, like corn has
Yeah.
indigestible fiber.
Yeah.
You're very likely going to see quinoa,
Seeds.
yeah, certain tiny seeds. Everybody's going to see that. So that's not necessarily something wrong. But if you're like, I see every salad and grain and bean and fruit and vegetable skin that I eat, something's really off with your microbiome.
And it can be as simple as check your chewing and speed of eating,
Yeah,
which is
true.
very important for many of us. I think that that'll maybe help a large percentage, but then there's also, yeah, an even equal maybe amount that maybe there is something deeper going on. And quick analogy, if you love gardening, it is, I get compliments on my little garden here as well. I don't have as much time as I would love to have a massive garden. But when people go, your fig tree's huge. Wow, your basil's massive.
And we have a
Look at
tiny patio.
look at all your dragon fruit. Yeah, our backyard is tiny and but we
It's like
grow a
10 by
lot.
10.
And it's like, and people are like, whoa. And it's like, well, what do you do? Well, it goes back to repleting your gut after antibiotics. It's like, well, one, I don't spray pesticides in my backyard. I don't try to do anything that takes away from the microbes. In the case of antibiotics, sometimes you do. So let's say my neighbor accidentally sprayed something, I would just continue doing what I'm doing. I give the microbes things to eat. I mulch, I compost, I add just natural nutrients to the soil, right? That they love to eat, and
Mm.
they will just thrive on
You
that,
sought
right?
out expert
I
advice
sought out expert
with
advice
Manju.
with Manju. Shout out
Hmm.
Farmer Manju, um, where I got my plants from
Yeah.
also as
He
well.
asked the questions of like, what is going to grow best in my patio that faces, I don't know what direction
We face
it
south. It's always
faces.
important. I love
Um,
south facing, or actually we're like southwest, so we get like a nice full spectrum of the sun. Anyway, you're getting me
but you
nerded
ask
out
those
about
questions instead of
right,
just
right,
being like, man, I tried to plant a cactus and it just didn't grow. And, my soil is just bad, right? No, you figured out, what's going to grow at the right times. You got expert advice,
right.
what's going to grow in your climate. And if something's off with your climate, if just nothing sticks, you're going to figure out how to fix that and remedy that.
Which is a great analogy for a probiotic. We're not saying
Mm,
probiotics are bad, but you want to ask those questions, because the analogy is like saying, I live in Alaska and I want to grow what James is growing in
I want to
Southern
grow
California.
mangoes. It's like,
That's not going to
oh
work,
no,
right?
no.
Unless you put in a lot of work and effort to have this specialized greenhouse and tons of energy. Otherwise, it's not going to work, right? So you want to understand what kind of ecosystem you have, which is your gut. It's unique, and then get those probiotics and say, oh, I need this species, or this is what I'm trying to do. This species of probiotic is going to help me. Not just go to Costco, buy this big bulk probiotic and be like, it's not working. Or sometimes, a lot of the times, it can make you feel worse
Yeah.
because you're just adding too much of the same species and it's not helping.
Or
So
something's off and they're the wrong
something's
species for
off.
you.
So garden analogies work well, and that was a great kind of context. But I
This
see
is
more
kind of a
questions
good
too.
question going
Love it.
along with that because Zena's asking, have you heard about the stool pills? We would love to hear your thoughts about it. Yes. So
Yes.
there, you can call them crapsules.
Yeah, I knew you were gonna say that.
So they
Take your
are fecal
crapsules.
microbiome transplant pills, where by mouth you are taking a literal fecal sample and you're swallowing that. It's timed release, so don't worry, you're not going to taste
You're
fecal
not gonna
matter
taste
in your
poop.
mouth. But it's timed release to where then that fecal matter gets released into the colon. Other ways that they do it is they go through the rectum and give you a fecal microbiome transplant. That way they make like a slurry and they inject it directly into the colon. But these capsules, these crapsules, are another way of inoculating different species into the colon. Right now in the US, it's only FDA approved for C. diff.
Mhm.
C. difficile is a type of bacterial overgrowth that causes life-threatening diarrhea and other microbiome imbalance. So that's the only indication right now that's FDA approved, but that doesn't mean that there aren't physicians who are using it for other modalities, because we do need to research. So there are other physicians who are conducting either federally funded research or their own private research, just so we know kind of indications and implications for fecal microbiome transplants. And I think that just like with stool testing, there is a huge opportunity for it. I just don't think we know enough about it yet,
Hmm.
because they have done studies that have shown things like a fecal microbiome transplant won't just change your gut, it can change your physiology. They did a microbiome transplant
Hmm.
from, I believe it was from mother to daughter, and the daughter had a normal body mass index and body composition, body fat percentage, muscle mass. Mother was obese. After that, daughter changed nothing about her lifestyle except the fact that she got this fecal microbiome transplant. She became obese just because she received her mom's microbes, and those microbes were more inclined for an obese climate.
Keep in mind these studies weren't big, but are like a large population, but
And a lot of them are mouse studies, but this was a human study.
yeah, but there are, I was gonna say there are a lot of mouse studies where this happens. So this is, I mean, it's yeah, and then with some human studies, so it's very interesting. It's just
Mhm.
really cool of like how important. Well, we know how important. We're trying to help you all know how important these microbes are. But really, I mean, something I was just writing recently. I think I was writing this and something I was working on, but really it's understanding microbes are like just this invisible connector connecting us all together, and so we can share them. I share them with Dahlia
Mhm.
all the time when I hug her and kiss her as my wife, and it's like we share it with our daughter, and we're always sharing microbes. The people we're around, the air we breathe has fungal spores, and I mean there's so much all around us, and then we can go extreme and do a crapsule and like really share those microbes, right? And
Mhm.
it's like what happens, and we're seeing what happens, but really we are connected by these microbes at the end
Mhm.
of the day. So when something's off, it's also this question of connection, of going, what am I connected to that's off? People, places, things, food that
Mhm.
you're connected to that is throwing you off as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
So I think that there's huge opportunities with it in a couple scenarios. Definitely C. diff will continue to be one of them, because again, it's life threatening and it is kind of like a uncontrollable condition in a lot of times, because they'll try to prescribe probiotics, but sometimes the probiotics aren't strong enough or don't withstand the environment of the gut to get into the colon. Um, so I think C. diff is great. I think we'll see this in the future with post-infectious gastroenteritis. So whether
Mhm.
that's food poisoning, a traveler's gut bug, we know that that's responsible for about 60% of IBS with diarrhea. So I think there's a huge opportunity to help a
Yeah.
really large subset of people with these FMTs, these fecal microbiome transplants. And then the third population who I think would really benefit from it is those with inflammatory bowel disease. Because right now, the way that we are treating those with inflammatory bowel disease for the most part is really just, we recognize they have such a fractured and imbalanced microbiome. We put them on medications to manage the inflammation that comes as a result of that. Because once the immune system is really locked into that, it turns on a cascade of inflammation. So, these medications that a lot of those with IBD are put on, whether it's an infusion or an injection or an oral, they
Mhm.
are just to downregulate some of those inflammatory signals. It doesn't do anything to change their microbiome. So they have still this extreme dysbiosis, this microbiome imbalance. So I think FMT in the future will be really big for those with IBD. And then we'll see. We'll see what else we can do with
Guys, healthy
FMT.
stool is brown gold. Like
Literally,
literally
it's
it.
worth a lot. If you are somebody who has a
I think I
healthy
could get a
body
lot of money for my stool.
composition, yeah, has not taken antibiotics frequently, at least in the last like 5, 10 years. We had a friend who did this. He was selling his stool on a regular basis to a stool bank.
Yeah.
And he was literally making bank, like
He was.
thousands of dollars a month from just pooping for these people.
Yeah.
But he was the right candidate to donate to them. He was healthy, young, active, healthy body composition, no antibiotics, great plant forward diet, plant-based diet. So
that's a whole nother episode. I love
could
that.
be a
Yeah.
gig if you
It's
have a
huge.
healthy gut, but we are seeing questions from those who maybe don't.
And SIBO, I mean, I see some SIBO questions just really quickly. I mean, go back. We've done many episodes on SIBO and just our approach to SIBO and how to overcome SIBO, IBS. But really quickly, someone was asking, can SIBO be healed? Yes. Quick answer, yes. Go back, watch some of our past episodes.
Yes.
Someone saying methane SIBO confirmed via breath test, about to start a special diet while adding antibiotics.
Don't do that. You're not supposed to start the diet with the antibiotics. So whoever told you that does not keep up with the data.
Red flag.
Red flag. While you're treating, you should be eating. You should never go on a special elimination diet while you're treating SIBO. You need to feed those bugs so the antibiotics, antimicrobials, whatever you're using to treat them with will actually capture the bugs. Because if you're just starving them while you're trying to treat them, they're very smart. They'll recognize there's no food for them inside the lumen of your gut. So they'll just go and hide in all these
Especially
bumps
if
and
you have
crypts.
biofilm,
Yeah.
antibiotics will not.
So they'll be like, I'll wait. I know they're going to eat it again. I'll just wait.
They're going to wait you out.
Yeah. So don't do that. Feed to treat. You need to eat to treat. Then after you've 100% eradicated them, that's when you do the elimination diet. So if whoever is working with you told you to do that, you need to ask them questions or maybe get a second opinion.
Yes. How can you tell your stool is off?
I think we did a whole episode on this. But
just really quickly, maybe.
Yeah, super quickly. The questions that I always ask my patients, how do you know your stool is off? 1, ask frequency. You should be having 1 to 3 complete bowel movements every day. The color should be a medium chocolatey brown. It should not be super dark. It should not be a tan or yellow or orange. It should stay together. It should come out solid, nice, soft snake type of stool, and it should stay like that in the toilet water. You shouldn't see a brown slurry every time you flush, or you shouldn't see that it just falls apart right when it hits the water, or it's liquid from the get-go.
And going back previously in what you were saying in this episode, seeing your food in your stool, too much color in your...
Smell your stool. It should not smell foul to you or anybody else who's smelling it.
Yeah.
And it also shouldn't leave behind a memory in the toilet. So if you're seeing skid marks and it's almost like a peanut butter consistency that you're really having to clean up a lot, that's not normal. Something's off with your stool. You also shouldn't see mucus or blood in your stool.
Yes. And really quickly, guys, if you want help, marriedhealth.com. You can work with Dahlia, Rachel, other dietitians, especially if you have other things going on, marriedhealth.com. We see really patients on almost all continents except Antarctica, which is crazy to think. So we work with, yeah, we'll see if there's scientists on Antarctica that need our help. But yeah, we work with people all over the world. So with telehealth.
Somebody's asking,
Ooh,
what about the elemental diet? We did a whole episode on this.
Yes, we did.
Can be beneficial in the right context. So it's very rare that I'll recommend the elemental diet, but I have. I've recommended it before. There is really good data, especially on, shout out to Mbiota. That's, if I'm going to recommend an elemental diet, that's the one that I do recommend. They have very strong consistency with eradication. So it can be a useful tool. It's not appropriate if you have history of eating disorder, or if you're on a lot of medications, or if you're highly active, and you won't be a good candidate to really only have 3 powdered meals a day, or you can have 4 if you'd like. But it can be helpful if you're a right candidate for it. And I would recommend if you've already tried other things and you're not eradicating your SIBO. So yeah.
Very cool. And go back. Yeah, you could type in Married to Health Elemental Diet on YouTube, or even just Google. It should pop up. You'll see it either Good Gut Live podcast or on our YouTube. But these are great questions. And
one last question. What side effects happen with antibiotics?
Ooh. Yeah.
So, I mean, it could be a myriad of side effects.
Yeah,
we've heard things from people losing their hearing to people losing mobility, or really just people losing the diversity in their gut and then having malabsorption from that, having severe constipation afterwards, stool that's off, that you can have any of your microbiomes affected after taking antibiotics if you don't quickly replete your bugs. So,
especially broad spectrum,
yeah,
then
broad
you're getting a
spectrum
broad
antibiotics.
spectrum of side effects for
So,
sure.
yeah, your skin microbiome, vaginal microbiome. You hear a lot of women who will say, I get a yeast infection after I take antibiotics. That shouldn't happen if you had a healthy microbiome to begin with, but
Mhm.
it can affect your vaginal microbiome, it can affect your oral microbiome. Lots of your other biomes outside of just your gut can certainly be affected with antibiotics. So again, take them if you need them to save your life or give you quality of life. Ask every question you can before taking the antibiotics. Again, is there a localized way that I can deliver these antibiotics? Is there one that's more specialized and not broad spectrum? How long do I need to be on this? And then use some of those tips that we gave to replenish your gut bugs after taking antibiotics.
So going back, we love the questions. Going back to the original topic, oxalates, salicylates,
We got far away.
lectins. We got far away. These are great compounds for you. Eat these
They're found
compounds.
in many beneficial foods.
Many beneficial foods will have these compounds because these compounds are food for your microbes, and they will create postbiotics, which are gifts your microbes are
Mm.
giving you. So eat your oxalates, eat your salicylates and lectins, but and then
Unless they're causing you discomfort, then work with a food and microbiome specialist to figure out what it is about them, what's going on with your gut, and how you can reintroduce them.
you can find that specialist at marytouth.com, as well as the goal being, and very important, the goal being to replenish your gut microbiome and continue to eat these foods in higher amounts
So
and
you can heal with each
heal
meal.
with each meal for sure. So if you like this episode, if you're watching live, you can find a replay at the Good Gut Live podcast. Visit marytouth.com for all those links and wonderful resources and information.
If there are topics you guys want to hear about, we're open.
Yeah, totally open. We have patients who are like, I want to hear about this. I want to hear about that. So, and that's where we get a lot of our topics from to talk about. So,
Or send us stuff. If you guys see videos out there that that's how we heard about this oxalate lady.
True.
Several people sent us this video. So if there are things like that you are wondering about or you're scared from, send them over. We're happy to do a live on it.
A patient recently, or a community just through Instagram DM, sent me a very disturbing video about like AI. It was this AI doctor. Like she wasn't even real, and she's doing all these videos, and it looks so real. And she's really at the end of it, they're selling like a supplement.
Mm.
It was deeply disturbing because it looked real. And a lot of people are getting fooled. And this person had like 500 plus thousand followers, which you can buy
Wow.
followers. So it was wild. So I don't know if that's an episode, or maybe make sure you're following us on Instagram. I might do a little video on that because that was wild.
Yeah, we
But
can do
lots
a
of
topic
stuff.
on that, like who we follow and why we follow them.
Ooh, our top, yeah, follow recommendations. That's a good one.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. An hour can go by so quickly, and we love it. But as always, you can catch Good Gut live every Friday, so you can ask your questions. You can find replays of Good Gut Live on the Good Gut Live podcast, and that's wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as marytouth.com. So as always, feel with each meal and
Heal with each meal. Until next time,
bye,
have a good
everybody.
day.